Hi, friends. And hi, friend.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Great to see you, Allie. There's so much for us to talk about. There's
Yeah.
so much for us to talk about our lives and our work, but I want to start with the most important thing to voters, the economy.
Yep.
Because yesterday the president, National Economic Council advisor, said something about the war and the economy.
hmm
You've known Kevin Hassett for many years. I've known him for less. But for me, it was a wow. And what better way to start this program but a wow? Let's watch it.
But the fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
That's
Okay,
really
I'm
the
going to go
last of
first.
our concerns.
I'm going to go first. So said we have a fundamentally strong economy. Okay, I'll give you that. If the war were extended, it wouldn't hurt the US economy. What? Followed by it would hurt consumers. So hold on. If it doesn't hurt the US economy, but it does hurt consumers, what in the holy hell do you
That's
call
not, yeah, it
that?
doesn't make any sense. There are kind of war that doesn't hurt the American consumer, right? It's a war that is using American munitions between two other countries that we're sort of financing, and then they buy our stuff, and no American gets hurt, no Americans involved. But that's not this kind of war, first of all. This is a real war, and it's actually affecting oil prices. So and the Strait of Hormuz and fertilizer and medication and all the things that are needed from that stuff. So it does affect consumers. And what a neat thing about our economy that 2/3 to 80% of decisions about how money is spent is made by consumers, not by the government. So if consumers have to make choices about what they spend, and gas prices are higher, and house prices are higher, and fertilizer prices are higher, and tariffs are higher, that didn't make any sense, and that surprised me because, as you said, I've known Kevin Hassett for a long time. He was the chief economist at a place called the American Enterprise Institute. It's a conservative,
Think
economics
tank? Yeah.
think tank. He knows better than to say what he just said. That was some
Allie,
strange stuff.
you know what kind of wars don't hurt the economy? War of the Roses,
Yeah,
dance battles. This war hurts the
yeah.
economy. And I want to just share the last thing that he said, where he said, but where you said, well, this is the least of our worries. The good news is this thing is ahead of schedule.
Right.
What
What
schedule?
schedule? What
Not
schedule?
one
Tell me what that looks
person,
like. Yeah,
not one person in this administration
we don't
has
have a schedule.
articulated
Yeah,
where we came from, why we're here, or where we're going.
right.
And you know that they deeply believe the most important thing or the thing that's potentially being hurt, one of the things being hurt the most is the economy. Because you don't see this administration putting out their national security advisors. You don't see them putting out their top military
Right.
officials. Over and over, they have their energy secretary, they got their treasury secretary, they have their national
Yep.
economic council advisor. The people who they have out there talking to the American people
Are not war experts. Right? Let me hear from some generals. Let me hear from some people, other than Pete Hegseth, who gives these strange press conferences a lot, but you don't get any real information out of it. He just basically berates the press and then uses language that suggests he's a 13-year-old playing a video game, which is all fine and good, except people are dead. Innocent people are dead on both sides. American service members are dead. And there's just no clarity. Just today, they
and
again would not rule out sending ground troops into Iran.
And Allie, if we are talking about the economy, we're spending well over $1 billion a day
By
and
some estimates, maybe two.
have not yet articulated
Yeah,
how and when we're leaving. And I think
yeah.
there's another part of the economy that we haven't mentioned yet. So obviously, any businesses that are impacted by the Strait of Hormuz are feeling it, right? Gas prices right now are $3.80 a
380 something,
gallon.
yeah. And
Diesel,
going up every single day. I mean, it's
correct.
going to get to $4 because $100 barrel oil means $4 a gallon gas. That's obvious.
Diesel is over $5 a barrel. So it's already hitting us immediately at the
Yeah,
gas tank.
yeah,
But then you have to think about all the input costs of businesses that have to operate here.
yeah,
We also know about all the fertilizer that goes through the
yeah,
strait and what that's doing to the American farmer, not to
yeah.
mention what does the American farmer run his or her tractor on? Diesel. But I want to
Diesel.
mention one other thing that I don't think we've heard that much about. Scores of businesses that have no direct involvement in the war. Do you know what they do when a war breaks out? they put their pencils down.
Yeah.
Okay. They put their pencils down and say, we need to keep our powder dry.
Yeah.
We may have had plans to grow and expand and do this and do that. When something like this
Yeah.
happens, that's going to impact the global economy, that could impact the US workforce, that we don't know where it's headed.
Yeah.
Business leaders put their heads down and hunker down.
And
In
it's
the
not
same-
it's not business leaders who are just doing defense or anything like that. It's literally
No.
some tech deal that was going to go through entirely unrelated to all of this. But people say, you know what, there's some risk out there that I don't fully understand. There's enough risk in my business. I've got a handle on that. But there's some risk out there that I don't understand. So how about we don't do this deal for the next 3 months or 6 months, and deal flow slows down. So the activity of government, the activity of business, the stuff that you and I talk about feel like animal spirits gets subdued in times like this. And if you're on the edge of a recession because you've got sort of weakening job numbers, weakening GDP numbers, layoffs, tariffs, if you're dancing around the edge of a recession, I don't know that we are, and I don't want to cheer one on. But if you're doing that, and then you see these little things just soften up around the edges of companies saying, I'm not expanding, I'm not hiring more people, maybe even I'm laying off. We're seeing some layoffs now. That's where this goes wrong.
So where you can, when you try to figure like where is Kevin Hassett, besides just to perform for a party of one, the president, or mislead us, you could say like, where is Kevin Hassett getting this from? He's getting it from, in part, because if you own a home, if you own stocks, if you're one
Times
of
are
the
great.
wealthier Americans,
Yeah.
times are great.
Yeah. Stock market
Kevin
suffered,
Hassett,
the stock market suffered a little bit, but a little bit.
a little bit, but it's coming from a high place. But if you are part of the administration, you are thinking about our economy as a whole, not just for wealthier Americans. Yes, for
or at least you
wealthier
should be.
Americans, things are okay. And what's interesting is, while the president may be surrounded this time, I say he's in a gilded cage, but while he may be surrounded by the wealthiest Americans, what elected Donald Trump, the people who are triple Trumpers, the people who voted for him 3 times, his original base, was largely created by those Americans who felt economically left out, who felt like others are rising and they're not. Our former colleague from NBC, Jonathan Allen, interviewed somebody at a gas station, and I think we have a soundbite of that, a Trump voter, and I want to share it.
Listen carefully to this.
If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You are a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
I took a piece of pizza because it was so entertaining to watch that. You know, fool me once, blame on you. Fool me twice, blame on me. 3 times. There are a lot of people like that woman. There are a lot of people like that woman.
And I want to talk later. And the reason that woman connects us to the Save America Act, we're going to talk about later. But the president is doing nothing to address affordability, which is the top issue for American voters.
Yep. He's doing the opposite, Stephanie. He's doing the opposite.
When the State of the Union took place, what was it now, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
The one sort of shining light that he was pointing to were gas prices, which he said gas was $1 a gallon, which it wasn't.
It wasn't $1 a gallon anywhere,
now
but
things are up 27, almost 30%
Yeah.
since the war started. So he's not at all addressing affordability.
and no mystery to that, by the way, that gas prices are up 30%, oil prices are up 40%, which means gas prices are going to go up 40%. They match. There's never a mismatch. It's just a lag. So your gas prices are going to go to 40%, go up 40%. That's going to get you to $4 a gallon, which you'll remember, Stephanie, is a psychological problem for Americans. That's when people start to think, do I downsize my car? Do I drive less? Do I carpool? Maybe that's good for energy and all that kind of stuff, but it will start making choices for people. And the tax rebates that people are getting, which in theory would have been good and used to be spent to stimulate the economy, are now used to pay for the increased goods of things because of either tariffs or this war. So that's a real bad concept. When the average American is going to spend $1,000 to $2,000 more this year, some of which they'll have gotten back in taxes, but what's the win? If you're getting the same amount of gas and the same amount of eggs and the same amount of stuff for $1,000 to $2,000 more, you're not any farther ahead.
No. Well, it comes as no surprise. This week, we have a lot of questions. For those of you watching right now, if you would like to send us a question, you can send it to us at
VelshieRule@ms.now. VelshieRule@ms.now. Or you can put questions in the chat in YouTube, which I have to be the first to admit I don't know what those words are that I just said, but apparently it's very effective. If you put a
My
chat in the
response to
YouTube.
that is okay, Boomer. Let's get to our first question. One of our dear colleagues went to Bryant Park because here we are in New York City. While it's freezing today, it has been sunny again. Great news for us. And we've got some questions. Let's go to the first one.
Do you think that the war in Iran right now is distracting Americans from the real issues that we're facing at home? And if so, how do you think that we can combat that as community, whether that be just in New York or and across the nation?
That's great. First of all, yes, it's distracting from things at home. A war would always distract from things at home. The question is this one deliberately intended to distract from things at home? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, Stephanie, but kind of feels a little wild. I mean, we were getting really close to those Form 302s, those FBI files about allegations against Donald Trump, and all of a sudden we're at war with Iraq, and everybody's got to be at their battle stations
You mean
for that.
regarding the Epstein files?
The Epstein files, yes, correct. So there's that. But the second thing is, what do we do about it? This is a great question. First of all, you can inundate your members of Congress and your senators with emails and phone calls. It does have an effect on them. Marjorie Taylor Greene said that that had an effect on her, that lots of people were calling and saying, why are we in this damn war? Number two, March 28th is another No Kings rally, and this is all of a piece, right? It's this concept of going to war without seeking the consent of Congress, which is actually illegal. And they're looking for 10 million people on March 28th. I think they were at 7 million last time. 10 million people. People go out and protest. Peaceful. They were all peaceful. Nobody got arrested. People go out and protest in a very safe way, but those numbers add up, and the government cannot ignore the fact that people are paying attention. And then the third thing, as you and I were covering last night, primaries. Every primary we've seen has higher voter turnout than expected. Vote. Vote in your primaries. Even if it's got nothing, voting in your local primary in Maine may have nothing to do with the war in Iran. It might, because you might be voting for a candidate who doesn't support it. But the signal that you are out there, that people are coming out in record numbers, that they care about their politics, is a warning. It's a shot across the bow of this administration to say the people are hearing and seeing what's going on, and the people don't like it.
I would say a few things, Allie. First of all, for your average apolitical voter out there, one of the biggest issues that we were facing towards the end of last year was what were we going to do about Obamacare subsidies that Republicans let expire, right? We saw healthcare premiums spike at the beginning of this year, and we have been offered absolutely no solution, no replacement, no nothing. So so when you talk about distractions, that's something that's impacting millions of Americans. Now, I want to talk for just a second about Trump-specific voters, okay? Donald Trump's entire mantra was about America first. And there were lots of Americans who could support this idea and say, you're right, America first. I don't like that we're getting involved. And you and I could argue why America first doesn't make sense, but let's just take it on its face. The argument that, yes, children might be suffering, there may be problems on the other side of the world, but as long as, until every child in the United States gets good health care, gets a good education, gets good health, is living their best life, we shouldn't care about what's abroad. That was part of what Donald Trump ran on, and that's what many of his supporters believe in, right? We shouldn't care about what's happening on the other side of the world. We should care about what's happening here. And Donald Trump promised to get us out of what he called forever wars and not start any new ones.
This wasn't a sideline for him. This was a mainstay of his campaigns.
That is correct. And the only thing that we've seen is them say, wow, Ukraine and Russia is way more complicated than we thought it was. That keeps raging on. We obviously saw the action taken in Venezuela, obviously the war taking place in Iran, and now the president is openly saying, Cuba, we're coming for you next.
Yes, and I want to talk about Cuba in a second, but I want to remind everybody about NATO. Donald Trump spoke about NATO. He's been bashing NATO a lot, and I want to remind people, NATO has something called Article 5, which is a mutual defense pact, which means if one NATO country is attacked, all other countries have to consider themselves attacked and respond in kind. In the history of NATO, it's happened one time. It was after the attacks of 9/11, when all NATO countries answered the call and in many cases sent troops for Afghanistan against the popularity of their own people, because their people were saying, we didn't get attacked, why are we sending troops? Here's what Donald Trump had to say about NATO allies not wishing to join him in this war in Iran.
Why are we protecting countries that don't protect us? And I've always felt that was a weakness of NATO. We were going to protect them, but I always said when in need, they won't protect us.
Yeah, so it's not quite sure we're in need because we started this war for no particular reason, and nobody seems to be able to prove that we were under attack. But I just want to remind people, the one time a NATO country was attacked, 9/11, they all came to our support. There's never been any other instance. We've never had to support a European country under NATO. So, you know, take that under advisement.
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, let's go to another queue.
We got a question? Oh, I think Stephanie was saying any question you guys have.
Whatever you want.
Okay. We're going to go to a question on Russia.
Was wondering
be
your
anything.
take on the recent lift of the oil embargo on Russia, and I was wondering what you think that means for gas prices and the U.S.'s current relationship with Russia.
Okay, I'm going to go. What
Yeah.
do I think it means for gas prices?
Pardon me.
Thus far, it's meant nothing here. It hasn't benefited us in any way. We haven't seen gas prices go down. What does it mean for Russia? Booyah! The greatest gift you could possibly see. And reminder, we have now lifted sanctions on Russian oil, bless you, at the same time that we are learning that Russia is working with Iran, providing Iran intelligence so they can locate U.S. targets.
Yeah.
That's happening.
So without
Steve Witkoff was asked by our colleagues at CNBC a week ago about Russia, and he said, well, the Russians told us they're not doing that, and I take them at their word.
That's great.
On
That's
what
amazing.
planet, why on earth would we
Would you be
take
taking-
Russia
yeah.
at their word? Because Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have gone and had upwards of maybe even 9 meetings in the last year. And so they're saying, I'm going to take Russia at their word. And I just want to point out those two people who are negotiating for the United States, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner is still not employed by the U.S. government, right?
Yeah.
So they could say, look, he's doing it out of his patriotism. He's not even getting paid to
Yeah.
do it. Oh, you better bet your bottom dollar he's getting paid to do it. While he's in the Middle East, he is still raising money for his fund and seeking investors. And you
$5
better
billion.
bet your bottom dollar that many investors in that region are
Yeah.
lining his pocket with money because my goodness, he's a person who's negotiating whether or not we're at war.
Our
What
new
did you
s-
eat that you're sneezing?
I was going to say
so
our
much?
new sponsor for the show is like an antihistamine or something. I don't know why I'm suddenly in a
Seriously.
sneezing fit. So even without lifting the sanctions on Russia, because there was a shortage of oil, right? It wasn't going through 1/5 of the world's oil wasn't going through the Strait of Hormuz. So Russia. Maybe every time I say Russia, it makes me sneeze. Russia has been gaining $150 million a day in extra revenue before we raised the six. Now, imagine they're running a war with Ukraine. We're financing a lot of that war with Ukraine. But Russia's now $150 million clearer per day to buy munitions and send troops into Ukraine. And now we've lifted the sanctions, so they've got yet more money to do this. So all of this effort and blood and treasure that we've put into saving Ukraine, we've largely undone by lifting the sanctions on Russia. And to your point, Russia's working with the adversary in this one. Ridiculous.
Correct. All right, let's hit another one.
Okay.
How about a question, guys?
I'm wondering about the government shutdown impacting the airport, and I'm wondering what it'll take for it to cease and for it to go back to normal.
Okay, so if you have been to an airport lately, hot damn, it is certainly impacting things. And we saw in the last 48 hours, the CEOs of 10 airline companies urge the government to fund TSA, right? So the reason this is happening is because the Department of Homeland Security is not being fully funded because Democrats and some Republicans don't feel great about the spending that's happening with regard to ICE and mass deportation. What's interesting to me is why it took these CEOs this long
Right.
to actually sign that letter and say, man, we need to solve this. We do need to solve it. It's probably, I mean, as of yesterday, TSA agents experienced their first full paycheck cycle
Yeah.
not getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I do just want to remind our viewers that even when the government shuts down, Congress always gets paid.
Yep.
Right? Most people out there, if you're not getting paid, you stop going to work. These people who already have stressed jobs working in airports are commuting to work while gas prices are higher. and they are not getting paid.
So remember that when you're stuck in these 2 or 4 hour lines, that as frustrated as you are, it's not their fault, and they're frustrated too. So give them a pat on the shoulder. I don't know if you're allowed to touch TSA agents, but give them some encouragement about the fact that they are performing a public service that is directed at your safety without getting paid. So I'm sure they're as frustrated as you are by these lineups. But there's no obvious solution to this, Stephanie, because again, even in the Senate, the president has decided that he is investing all his political capital in the SAVE Act, not this.
Let's talk about the SAVE Act. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, we're almost at 3:30. Should we invite our guest to join us?
He'll be here in a few minutes.
Got it.
So we can talk
All
about
right, then
that with
maybe
him
we
in a
hit
few
another
minutes.
question before we get to SAVE. Let's hit another question.
You got a question for us, guys? All right, we got one that's coming in here. Can you read that banner? What does the war mean?
What does this war mean for Donald Trump's popularity ratings and the midterms?
Oh,
Nothing good at this
Nothing
point.
good.
Nothing good. The president was already facing not bleak, but not great approval.
well, he was
ratings.
underwater. He was underwater
Yeah,
across
he
the
was,
board.
He was underwater. Listen, there are some people in this country that are happy we're taking the action we are.
Yeah,
But one of the
but
ways,
it's about a third, right? It's about 35% who,
one of the ways you get the American people on your side as the president when you're taking action like this is that you publicly, and you do it over and over with a consistent message, explain to the American people why we're doing this,
yes,
right?
cogent message.
And just yesterday, basically the number 2 person in terms of counterterrorism under Tulsi Gabbard, a man by the name of Joe Kent, who's as MAGA as they get, right? He's mega MAGA, resigned in protest over this war, saying that Iran was not posing an imminent threat. The administration has not explained to the American people why we're engaging in this war, and for that reason, like, this guy is a Trumper to the 10th degree, right? He became, many people, you might say, where do I recognize him from? When he was running for Congress, he was one of those people defending January 6 rioters, and now here he is saying, "Basta, this is too much."
Yeah. Let's take a look at, we've got a question about this. We're talking about Joe Kent. Is Joe Kent just taking advantage of an unpopular Trumpian move in order to establish an independent MAGA brand? It's an interesting question. I don't know enough about Joe Kent to know.
Is Kent just taking advantage of an unpopular Trump move in order? He may be. Listen, we are seeing fractures in the Republican Party right now in sort of the right-wing media influencer space. You are seeing sort of a battle royale between a number of right-wing personalities. You're not seeing it so much in Congress, right? Does Thomas Massie quietly have 30 Republican members of Congress behind him saying they oppose this? Maybe, but the answer is quiet. They're certainly not saying it out loud. But I think there are portions of the MAGA universe who are saying that Donald Trump is breaking with the idea of America first. Could this be how Joe Kent, a Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others say that they're original MAGA?
Yeah, that's interesting, because 35% of that base is the question is the 35% that Donald Trump never gets below. Are they Trumpers or are they MAGA people? In other words, could they be Joe Kent, Marjorie Taylor Greene, other people, maybe even J.D. Vance? Could they gather behind those people, or do they really like and trust Donald Trump? That's an interesting thing, because 35% is a good spoiler number for everybody. It's not enough to win major elections, but Donald Trump doesn't get below sort of 34, 33%. That's his base.
Here's one for us from Jane Hallstrom via YouTube. How much will olive oil and other products I love to buy from far across the world go up in cost with oil prices rising so high?
Okay, very good question. There is no direct relationship between olive oil and crude oil. However, there are interesting relationships between crude oil and other things that you ingest or buy, and that is largely that shipping is dependent on fuel. So even the ships that carry the oil need oil. So for instance, I don't know what the number is, but somewhere well above 55% of all our medication in the United States comes from India. And for some reason, I know nothing about how medication is made, but the inputs into that medication come from the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know whether that's oil inputs or I don't know what it is, but stuff comes from there. And now India has warned that we're going to run out of supply material to manufacture the medications that get shipped to America that are generally generics. So, for instance, your generic medications will either run into shortages, in which case you'll have to buy the expensive ones. If you're on insurance, they often don't let you buy the expensive ones, or you just won't be able to get them, or the prices will go up. So that's that connection. Olive oil comes from a lot of interesting places, including Greece, Lebanon, and through the Middle East. That shouldn't be a problem because shipping on that goes through the Mediterranean, doesn't go through the Gulf, the Arabian Gulf. So shipping that's going from the Mediterranean should be fine. So for now, your olive oil is safe. But it's a good question.
Indeed. Well, safe, except it costs more to drive to the grocery store or the
Correct.
specialty store
Correct.
where you would go to purchase said
Yes,
olive
and
oil.
there are probably tariffs on the olive oil too. So your olive oil might be more expensive for other reasons, but it's not having to do with Iran. Let's take a video question, please.
I'm wondering why the Democrats in Congress keep voting against their own interests.
That could be the name of our show. You and I have been talking about this for years, Stephanie. And I guess it depends on what you think their own interests are, right? If their own interests are serving their constituents, and then they are voting against their own interests. But what if their own interests are not getting targeted by Donald Trump? What if their own interests are not getting primaried by Donald Trump? What if being a member of the United States Congress is such a great job that you will do anything and sell your soul to keep it? You and I have talked about this. It's a fine job. It's not the best job in America. Like, I don't understand why one would sell their soul for this. Because when it comes to some of these issues, like the SAVE Act, like declaring a war without going to Congress, these are Republican things. These are things that Republicans don't like. And yet, can't get a single vote to object to the fact that Donald Trump's running a war without asking Congress. That's not allowed. That's illegal. That's against the Constitution of the United
So many
States.
of the Republicans who are getting on board with this Donald Trump Save America Act, they don't support it. They're doing it for their own.
No, and it's
political
bad
reasons,
for
right?
them.
Right. John Cornyn in Texas desperately needs Donald Trump support because he's trying to defeat Ken Paxton. John
Yes.
Cornyn has been in Congress, I don't know, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And he's now out there saying, we got to get this Save America Act
Yes.
passed. And he's being asked by some of his colleagues saying, this doesn't make any sense. And Cornyn is saying, oh, we'll just mark it up in committee. We'll make amendments, knowing that's never going to
Yeah.
happen. But right now he's willing to say
So-
anything and do anything to win Trump support.
Trump-
And the reason Trump cares so much about the Save America Act is because what this really is a voter suppression tool. It is going
100%.
to limit the American people's ability to go out there
Yeah.
and vote.
I want to
He's
remind
not
people.
addressing issues that are facing the American people.
Yes.
He's certainly not addressing affordability, a number of issues. So instead, he's saying, well, how do I just adjust the system to make it harder
Yeah.
to vote so you cannot vote against me?
And we are joined. Dean Withers is with us.
Howdy, howdy! It's good to meet you guys. Thank you so much.
Dean, I'm
for
looking at
inviting me
your
on the
I'm
program.
looking at your numbers, Dean. I'm new to social media relatively. I have 70 followers on TikTok. I'm better on Instagram. I got about 50,000. Dean's got 3 million on Instagram, 5 million on TikTok.
Dean,
Let me-
where did this come
Dean,
from?
I need 5
and
minutes of your
why?
time. I need 5 minutes of your time. Just a little consult, if you know what I'm saying.
Of course, man. I'd love to chat. It's an algorithm that you got to learn, but once you know it, I mean, there's no height.
All right. Well,
there's no
you and I,
ceiling.
you and I,
But
you and I
where
are
did
on the
this
chin
come
wagon.
from? What did you get into this space because you always loved politics? Did you get into this space because you were an angry American? Did you get into this space because you saw a business opportunity?
Yeah, good question. So I got into this space kind of by random chance, if that makes any sense. So I started doing what I do now by joining random TikTok live streams in the middle of the night to debate people on these topics, just because they're what I care
Like
about.
what? What do you get to explain?
A really good example would be abortion. I'm pro-choice. I think that access to abortion in America is very, very important. And I would join live streams in the middle of the night and in my free time just to debate people that disagreed with me that were pro-life to try to change their mind. And then the snowball effect was kind of created where a lot of people liked what I had to say. I started running my own live streams to host these debates, and here we are a handful of years later, kind of after I've done these debates even on larger scales on YouTube channels like Jubilee, and we've also saw second order snowball effects like with political commentary and breaking the news that have kind of led to where I'm at today. But, to kind of condense it down to one phrase, it would probably fall under that pissed off American category.
We're going to invite our viewers to ask you questions. Put questions in the chat in YouTube. You can still also email us questions, but there'll probably be a bit of a lag on that if you want to get Dean to answer them. That's velshirul at ms.now. But put stuff into the chat and we'll ask Dean. Dean, let me ask you about this concept. You mentioned Jubilee. You mentioned getting on and debating with people. There are some people in America who have decided that the safer place to be is in their bubble. I think across the political spectrum, people have done that. Mm-hmm. How hard or easy is it for you to engage people who don't share your view? And how effective do you think that is?
So about the difficulty of engaging in conversation with people who don't share my view, I guess I don't really see that difficulty every single day because the way that I run my live streams is I say, hey, if you disagree with me and you want to have a chat, click this button to request to call in, kind of like a call-in radio show from the early 2000s. And, that queue's always full, but, that could just because we have a lot of viewers on a day-by-day basis, around 20,000 people. So you're always at the end of the day going to have at least like 100 people that want to call in. But, I have seen that difficulty in trying to, get people into that queue in the first place. Sometimes there will be hours in my live streams where no one will want to chat, or even liberal viewers will call in to try to get their MAGA friends and family to hop on the line to have a conversation with me. And they'll say, no, 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 no. So what I will say is it's gotten progressively more difficult as Donald Trump's second administration has continued on, due to the fact that he's only become more and more indefensible by, the reign of terror we've seen.
I see. So it's harder for you to find people. I mean, because you talk about Jubilee, and I'm wondering, like sometimes I watch Jubilee and I say, look, if you're a good debater, if you're like a college level debater, that's an interesting concept. But most people don't talk like they talk in those Jubilee debates, right?
Yeah, and the goal is just to have real conversation, with real people. Right. Sometimes, it looks a bit different than that with a hyper debate me bro language or whatever, whatever that means. But the goal is just conversation with people that I disagree with.
I would love to hear
to a challenge. So I'll tell you the challenge in cable news. Like I would love to have more Republicans on TV. And
we used to, Stephanie. We used to have a lot.
And the challenge is Republicans who are willing to be critical, not bash, but just be critical. Republicans who are looking to look at a set of facts and decide.
Steph, they're telling you to move your mic closer to your face.
And decide based on those set of facts that they're going to be critical in any way of the administration. When they do that, they get annihilated. They get annihilated by the administration. They get annihilated by right-wing media. So they just say, you know what? Not worth my life, not worth my brain power. I don't want to go on television. And then there's another group of Republicans who would love to come on television, but not to have a good faith debate. There's a small group of Republicans who want to come on television for the sole purpose of owning the libs, punching another person we're going to have on air to please the president, almost as though they're performing like in Gladiator. And the president is sitting there on his throne watching them slay someone else. And we're obviously not going to engage in that because it doesn't help anyone get better or smarter, which is the goal of our programming. So do you find it hard to find people, especially now, to just have good faith debates?
Good question. The answer is absolutely. A lot of the people I talk to end up kind of coming from that I want to destroy the liberal in the conversation, and when I can't do that, I'm going to get really angry perspective compared to just trying to figure politics out and, hear somebody else out for their alternative view. I didn't find it as hard maybe a year and a half ago, right before the election. There were millions of Americans who were loudly outspoken in support of Trump. And some of them were more intelligent and thought that they should support Trump because of what he said about making the economy great again. But as I pointed out earlier, now, a year and a half later, more of those good faith, intelligent people who only supported Trump because they were maybe a little bit more misled or had fallen victim to propaganda that the GOP invested millions of dollars into. They've kind of left the MAGA base, and now most of the people who are left are those that don't really have those good intentions of wanting to do what is best for themselves, their families, their family, their friends, and the world around them, but more so just find them indoctrinated into what I could only best describe as a cult, which ultimately kind of does lead to that bad faith engagement with people who may disagree with them, especially the enemy of the Democrats that has been identified
Because it's not based in
as
critical
people we
thinking
should
at
hate
that
by
point.
Trump. Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about something Donald Trump said. He was asked by a reporter. He does not seem to like questions about the war in Iran, right? We really want to get to the bottom of why we're at this war with Iran. And in a normal world, we'd have a debate about, okay, government has put forth its argument. Congress would debate whether or not they, on the behalf of the American people, would like to support this. So Donald Trump was asked about how he will know the war is over. Listen to this.
They were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil.
But I felt it was something we had to do. When are you going to know when it's over? When I feel it.
They should be very thankful that this group of people feels the way we do.
They were.
When I feel it. And then he said subsequently,
Allie,
when I feel it in my bones.
You chose that mashup just
Yeah.
to get to me.
Why is
Dean,
that?
so last week when the president was saying repeatedly excursion, excursion rather than incursion, it was
Yes.
driving me especially
Yes.
mad because
Yes.
I had
An
a
excursion is when you
had a
go out to the
teen
White's West Side here and you get on a boat and you go around to the Statue of Liberty.
Yes, I had a teen son on spring break last week. So as I was Venmoing a snorkeling trip in the Dominican Republic, that's an excursion.
Correct.
And where
This is
we are
an
putting
incursion.
U.S. military lives at risk. It's an incursion. So,
Yeah.
Allie, back to your question.
Yeah.
Sorry, you added that in there just to make me crazy.
So, I mean,
again.
how do you handle a thing like that, Dean? I mean, when he says, I'm going to feel it in my bones, the war will be over when I feel it. It's like, we have a republic that's not based on your feels.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I know exactly why Donald Trump is saying that now, because last week he said that the war's already pretty much over. We've
Yep.
already won. And, the timeline given by Pete Hegseth is wrong, and we're going to be pulling out shortly. But then Iran refused to reopen up the Strait of Hormuz, and all of our allies refused to send their warships to it. And now we're in continued engagement with them. And now we gotta, come through with Donald Trump's threat of hitting them 20 times harder than we ever have or whatnot. But I guess, in short, my point here is that we hear contradictory messaging from Trump and other members of the administration, and they want less contradictory messaging because clearly it's a bad look for them. So now he's just reducing down to saying, well, it's going to be over when I feel it. Because when he said 8 weeks, then it went to 16. When he said we've already won, then it went back to, well, now we need to possibly send the military in for boots on the ground. So now it's just when I feel it. I don't know. The way I deal with that is just by pointing out how stupid it sounds.
Well, no, it is. It's also an
it
absence
just
of
sounds
accountability,
stupid.
right? Because
Right.
in theory, we're supposed to be able to hold him to account because he said it's going to be a 6-week war or a 4-week war or whatever the case is. Now, when we've got when I feel it, there's no work for a reporter to do at that point. It's like, do you feel it? Do you feel it yet?
Yeah, you're right. There is no work for any reporter to do there. I don't know. The vibe that it gives to me is that he just thinks that the average American is down to consign themselves to whatever Donald Trump says or does, is not really that smart.
But they're going to
and kinda just
die.
treats politics.
Our
Right,
prices
yeah,
are going
exactly.
up. Our oil prices are going up. Americans are dying. Innocent people are dying in our name on the other side of the world. Like, at what point did we become so complacent that we don't care about this stuff? Did everybody miss the Iraq War?
Yeah, apparently a lot of the MAGA base did, and that's what I hear every single day in my live stream is that if we just go in and liberate the Iranian people, everything's going to be awesome.
Throw
and
roses at
the
us.
Middle East will have peace, right?
Wow.
Okay, and let's be clear. No one on this in this conversation is defending the now deceased Ayatollah or defending his son or defending the Iranian regime. No one is. Okay, they have been disastrous for decades and decades.
No, they're
The
brutal
problem
and
is-
they're murderous and all those things. And that's a bad thing. And lots of places are. And
and
we
if
just
you're
don't
gonna
need to be at
take it
war
on,
with all
you
of them.
need a real plan.
You need a
Which gets
plan.
us to our next question.
Exactly.
No Motive via YouTube has sent to us, how accurate is the idea that the U.S. is wasting $1 billion a day on their invasion of Iran? I would just say,
I think it might be higher than that.
but I also think we have to be careful. I don't know if we can use the word wasting. It costs $1 billion a day, right? But hold on. I'm not saying that this, I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't be at
You're
war.
gonna get you're gonna get in trouble for this.
Hold on, hold on, hold on. I'm not saying we should or we should be, but like, this is what it costs.
I'm down with wasting. I'm totally down with wasting.
Okay, fine, then go. Then
I
go.
am too. I think I'm with
Okay.
wasting.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting too technical in that the question isn't, is the $1 billion a waste? The question is, does it cost $1 billion? It does cost $1 billion, and this administration hasn't proven why they should be doing it.
So
you
I'll
two
just
answer
tell
the
you why
question.
am I thinking, other than the fact that I don't really like wars that are unnecessary. We keep moving these carrier strike groups into the Gulf of Mexico. Apparently, the United States Navy is now going to be escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a terrible use of your taxpayer dollars. But we've also moved these strike groups out of Asia. Now, if you're China, I don't know if China's going to take advantage of this or not, but China's got their eye on Taiwan. And one of the reasons they don't have their eye on Taiwan all the time is because there are U.S. carrier strike groups that can launch nuclear missiles at them and intercept anything they do. And if they launch something on Taiwan, the Americans can be there because we have a treaty to back up Taiwan. Guess what? If anything happens to Taiwan, we may have a treaty. We're not around to help. So there's actually a danger to this. And then the other danger, Stephanie, is these farmers who don't have enough money because of tariffs, Americans who don't have enough money because of health care. Remember, Doge was cutting like every last, taking staplers from offices to save money? We don't have $1 billion or $2 billion to spend on a non-necessary war. And I'm not saying all wars are non-necessary. Sometimes they are. But the last time we did regime change really successfully was at the end of World War II, where Japan and Germany regime changed. That took total war. That took hundreds of thousands of dead people, and that took nuclear weaponry. And it did work in the end. But are you prepared to commit that to Iran? I don't think so.
Well, that's a really good point. I was talking about this earlier on my buddy's live stream. There are two countries in the history of humanity that have been completely and totally bombed into complete and total submission.
Yep.
Those two countries are, as you just said, Germany and Japan. And let's run the calculus here. Is that something that A, we think we could do to Iran, and then B, are we willing to do to Iran?
Right, because with Japan, there's still a consciousness about the fact that, all right, it ended a war, but killed a whole lot of innocent people. And a reasonable mind can hold both thoughts, right? Was it worth it or was it not worth it to do that? And I think reasonable people don't come to a conclusion on that. We're going to do this? We're going to kill a whole lot of innocent people? When they bombed that refinery in Tehran about a week and a half ago or something, and all you saw above Tehran was this smoke, Ian Bremmer, the global analyst, posted, he said, great way to win the hearts and minds of the Iranian people who hate the regime. Right? When you take out their oil facilities and they can't breathe, it's like there are lots of people in Iran who would be very happy to see the Islamic regime gone. We're not even winning them over at this point.
Yeah,
All right, we got another
absolutely.
question coming at us.
All right, how accurate? No, wait, there's a different question.
No, this is the same one.
All right, we're going to get a different question in just a
Here we
second.
go.
Kelly, do you think this is Molly? Hi, Molly. Do you think the SAVE Act is just a power play since the GOP is seeing signs that they're in big trouble? Uh-huh. I think that's exactly what
That's a
it is.
given.
Yeah, there's no other reason to have it. Voter fraud is 0.00005%, 5 zeros. That means people who are non-citizens who register to vote. It is an absolute non-issue. Dean, Stephanie's tired of me saying this, but the only issue in American voting is that 60% of people vote. It should be 100. All our efforts should be getting from 60 to 100. Not this puny little thing that is of no consequence, that even if you believed that tiny little number of non-citizens voted, it wouldn't have swung any election anywhere in America at all, ever.
Yeah.
And it's a felony. The disincentive to doing that is really bad. You can go to jail, you will definitely not get your citizenship, and you'll get deported from America anyway. Like, tell me who the person is who's rushing to vote, given all that stuff that happens to you if you get caught.
What do you think, Dean?
Well, the first thing is, I think that it's important that we on the left get our messaging right about the SAVE Act, because the issue isn't really a requirement for voter ID to vote. ID to vote. My apologies. It's more so a requirement to prove citizenship.
Correct.
To vote.
Very different.
And what we see inside of the SAVE Act is that a mere ID won't do that. You have to have a birth certificate or a passport. And now larger issues arise out of the fact that, well, could this be considered a voting tax, the $200 that people have to spend on passports. Would we possibly be okay with requiring a passport if it was something that every American citizen could get for free? And all these questions are being thrown around months before we got to hit the voting booths. And in consideration to the fact that I think, according to a couple members of Congress, this would disqualify 9% of people from voting. And it's funny because that 9% would actually include me right now. I live on my own, 21 years old, have my condo with my girlfriend, but I'll be honest, my dad still has my birth certificate and passport an hour and a half away. So, if I want to go to register to vote, before I could do that, if the SAVE Act passes, I got to drive an hour and a half. And on top of that, I'd say something else that we don't really talk about when having a conversation about the SAVE Act and if or if not it's being used by the Trump administration for potential voter suppression on the left is clearly, and they're telling it to our faces.
Yep.
Donald Trump to the New York Times maybe 2 months ago told them that he regretted not seizing the voting machines during the 2020 election and using the National Guard to do so.
Yep.
I think it was maybe like a month ago that he said, I don't care if Congress doesn't pass the SAVE Act. I'll do it on my own.
Yep.
Or maybe we should just nationalize the elections altogether. And this is ludicrous. It is so
crazy.
insane.
It's crazy.
And I would argue here that it all goes back to Donald Trump's fake elector scheme of the 2020 election that no one talks about enough. We do not talk about the fact that in the 2020 election, Donald Trump sent fake slates of electorates to 7 of our key swing states that Biden won, and he sent them with fake certificates of ascertainment, which is the total tally of the vote from that state, saying that he won the state and Biden lost, when in all reality the opposite was true, and then sent them back to Congress and then pressured Mike Pence into certifying the fake ones as real. If Donald Trump got what he wanted in 2020, he would have been installed for a second term.
But for the fact that Judge Luttig decided to learned to tweet, and gave Mike Pence cover to say, you have no responsibility here, that you have no role to do that, things could have been very, 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 very different. And Tim Snyder, the expert on totalitarianism, postulates that maybe this war with Iran, and again, this might be out there, but he says it, is meant to trigger a response that looks like a terrorist attack on America, which could trigger a state of emergency and give Donald Trump what he wants. Troops in the streets, troops at the polls, and federalization of the elections.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even too out there anymore because we also heard Donald Trump say maybe 4 months ago something about, I forget the country, some country not running elections due to an active war that they were in, and how maybe like that'll happen to us or something along those lines. But listen, my point
too
here
crazy.
Nothing's too crazy. My point here is that obviously the SAVE Act is for voter suppression. 2020 proves it. His comments to the New York Times prove it. And his comments about no elections during war proves it. So it's not even a question.
All right, we got a question on video. Let's listen to it.
So what would it take for inflation to be resolved? Like, what resolution would we need to find and attack at full force for things to actually be effectively changed in a better way for all of us? Because gas prices, food prices, everything has went up. So that's just something that I really wanted to know.
That's an amazing, amazing question. I got 4 easy takes on that. 1, get out of the Fed's business. Let them do what they have to do with interest rates. They didn't move on interest rates today, by the way, which is the smart thing to have done. Number 2, how about don't start a war that's going to send oil prices up to $100 a barrel and gas prices up to $4 a gallon if you think affordability is an issue. Number 3, how about deal with these tariffs? Like, I don't know what you're reading that tells you that companies and other countries bear the weight of these tariffs. That's simply not true. American consumers bear the weight of the tariffs. And I mean, I don't even know what number 4 is. Like, just do the first 3 and you'll get a handle on the situation.
You've answered the question correctly. There's nothing else to add. Dean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe something else could be said about inflation in specific industries like the housing market.
That was my 4th point. Regulate. Get some regulation in there.
Yeah, more regulation and more smart subsidies. As well,
this administration,
specific industries.
This administration is getting rid of every piece of regulation that would stop a company from charging more money for everything but like the whole concept of consumer protection. The Consumer Protection Financial Protection Bureau is basically gutted. It's non-existent. The FTC and the FCC are all about passing through mergers that Donald Trump and his buddies want done.
Yeah,
The
but
consumer
not
protection
necessarily
aspect.
mergers that make sense, right?
No,
So
no.
pre-Donald Trump, during the Biden administration, CEOs across industries would complain about Lena Khan
Yep.
and say the FTC chair, saying that she was so restrictive and so academic, she was impractical, and it made it too difficult for businesses to grow and thrive. Now, the difference is in Trump 2.0, these regulatory bodies aren't pro-business. They're pro-business that works for this administration. And
Right.
CEOs know that. They know they need to show up at that White House with favors and goodies and gifts and carve-outs for either Donald Trump or his family businesses, or Howard Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald, his investment bank that his children now run. That's how they're getting deals done. And while they think it may be completely immoral, they're saying, well, this is the cost of doing business and I know how to play.
Right.
Yeah, what do you got to say about that, Dean? Because it doesn't seem like I will say this. Economically speaking, fighting inflation is at a minimum 10 times more complicated than fighting a recession, right? A recession is relatively easy. You dump a lot of money into the economy, you stimulate the economy, you lower interest rates, people spend money, companies spend money, and generally speaking, in a year and a half to two, it's over. And then you have something called creative destruction on the other side, where some industries have disappeared, but brand new ones have started, and it's actually, we know how to do this. Inflation throws companies off the rail for a decade. I mean, or countries off the rail for a decade. This is a very, very serious problem that this administration does not take seriously.
Dean, as you've just learned, Allie and I love talking about the economy. So we've started this program talking the economy. We're ending this program talking about the economy. Thank you.
Can we
so
listen
much
to that?
for
Can we
joining
listen to
us.
the gas lady again? I don't think
You know what?
Dean listen
Let's
to the gas
listen
lady.
to the gas lady one more time before we
This
leave.
is our colleague Jonathan Allen interviewing a woman at a gas station who was a Trump supporter, former Trump supporter.
If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You are a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
I like that lady. I just like that lady.
Oh yeah, it's a good thing that people's minds are changing. But I mean, I think we saw her mind change because it personally impacted her. And I wish that their minds would have changed forever ago, even when the administration impacted others. But hey, you know what? Late is better than never.
Whatever you'll take, however. But I think that point you just made is really, really important, Dean, and that is when you are watching things happen to other people. You need to understand that they are of you. I don't think the whole idea of I should protect them because eventually they'll come for me. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that injustice is just injustice. And I thought Minneapolis demonstrated that for this country, where those people, those American citizens, would go out and talk about protecting their neighbors. They didn't use the term undocumented immigrants. They didn't call them undocumented aliens or any of that stuff. Our neighbors. These are our people. They're of our cloth. This country is built on that. I was thinking, Stephanie, you were in the St. Patrick's Day parade yesterday. I was watching that, and I was thinking that is the beauty of this country. Everybody's got their parades, and they're proud of their Irish, but they're also proud of their American. And it was really amazing to watch that. We must look out for each other for the sake of looking out for each other, not because if we don't look out for them, they're going to come for us. They may never come for us.
Correct.
But
all right,
absolutely.
gentlemen, we've
do
got
the
to
right
wrap
thing.
this thing up. Thank you so much for joining us, Dean. Great to have you here. Allie, always great to see you. I'm about to turn into a pumpkin, so I got to roll.
All right.
Oh, wait. Allie, we should have shared our own news. Shoot, I got to go in 1 minute. If you haven't seen the news yet, you're going to learn it tonight on the 11th hour. If you're a big 11th hour fan, you're going to start to like 11th hour way more. Do you know why? Because Ali Velshi is about to be the new host. Starting in June, my dearest friend, Ali Velshi, will be taking the helm. He'll be the new anchor of 11th Hour. And you who watch this knows there is one thing I love more than anything, and it's money, power, politics. I will be leaving the 11th Hour, and we are going to be launching a new morning program, a new show, a talk
Gonna be
show
amazing.
specifically focused on that intersection of business and politics, right? People vote on what affects them, not offends them, and that is the economy. So be sure that Allie's going to visit on my show. I will never be leaving 11th Hour. I'll be visiting.
Yep.
But we're super excited about our new news to share.
You can start your day with her and end it with me.
That's a day.
All right, buddy.
Mwah. See ya.
Send your emails at velshirule@ms.now. Talk to you next week, 3 o'clock Wednesday.